Do you know what's beautiful about Formula One? It's the ultimate meritocracy. 20 drivers, the fastest in the world, selected purely on talent, grit, and raw speed. Yeah, sure it is. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing something absolutely diabolical. We're ranking drivers of the current F1 grid by how much their daddy or mommy, we don't discriminate, had to do with getting them there. Before you guys come at me, obviously, we are not going to cover every single driver on the grid, unless you want this video to be longer than an FIA investigation. So we're focusing on the most interesting cases, the ones people actually argue about online. So I'm calling this the F1 Wealth and Connections tax bracket. It's like the actual tax bracket. The richer you are, the more you pay. Except in this case, what you're paying is my respect. Yes, so we go from tax bracket 1, the absolute grinders who came from nothing, all the way up to tax bracket 4, where nothing means your family only owns 3 horses and 2 race teams. And then we get to the Nepo Baby Awards, a very special ceremony for those who didn't just benefit from privilege, they occupied a seat that another, more talented person deserved. Starting with none other than Fernando Alonso, the man who's been in Formula One since before some of these drivers were born, literally. His dad was a mechanic, not a principal, not a billionaire, a mechanic. And Fernando turned that into 2 world championships, a career spanning literally 3 decades, and a personality so big it has its own gravitational pull. The man came back to F1 after 2 years away and immediately started complaining that the car wasn't good enough.
The engine was going much slower than before. Amazing.
After which, Fernando, with that very same car, went out and finished on the podium anyway. Alonso doesn't belong on a nepotism video. He is the video. He's what happens when pure, unhinged talent meets a man so determined to win, he's basically aged backwards out of spite. Esteban Ocon, the man, the myth, the guy who lived in a caravan for years so he could afford to keep racing. Let me paint you a picture. While some of these guys were getting private Zoom sessions with their dad's racing engineer, young Esteban was falling asleep to the sound of a motorway service toilet flushing at 2 a.m. in a vehicle the size of a garden shed. His parents sold their house. Sold their house! They gave up literal bricks and mortar for this kid to drive in circles at 200 miles per hour. And you know what? It worked. He made it to Formula One. He won a race. He beat a 2-time world champion as a teammate. I personally think Esti Besti is the pure epitome of a man who built everything he had right now from scratch. And honestly, I couldn't be more proud of it. Lewis Hamilton, the greatest of all time, and before you fight me in the comments, save it for your own video. Lewis's dad, Anthony, worked multiple jobs to fund his karting. We're talking night shifts, side hustles, everything. He was not wealthy. He was dedicated. There's a massive difference. Yes, McLaren eventually picked up the bill, but that's because the kid was so obviously absurdly talented that not sponsoring him would have been a crime against motorsport. Some people in this video got to F1 because of who their dad is. Lewis got to F1 because of what he is. And then he went on to win 7 world championships, just to make sure everybody got the point. Actually, do you know what's wild? Lewis Hamilton is literally the poster child for meritocracy in a sport drowning in nepotism. He's the exception that makes everyone else look worse by comparison. And honestly, he probably belongs in bracket 1. But he's been a Mercedes driver for a decade, so he lost his suffering privileges. Liam Lawson, New Zealand's proudest export since the All Blacks. And I cannot stress this enough. That Kiwi accent?
Damn, Yuki, you're really scucks.
His family had to put a lot into his career financially. Selling farm equipment, borrowing money from the community. New Zealand is not exactly the karting capital of the world. Getting from there to a Red Bull seat is a journey most people couldn't even imagine. And Red Bull didn't hand him anything out of charity. They've dropped people for less. He earned his promotion the way you earn things at Red Bull, by being very fast and also not annoying Helmut Marko, which somehow seems harder. Respectable. We approve. Isack Hadjar, another Red Bull Jr. French-Algerian background, his family supported him, but they were by no means Formula One money. Got into the Red Bull system on talent, climbed the ladder and earned his seat the old-fashioned way. We don't know a huge amount about his financial background, which in Formula One is actually suspicious, because if his family had a yacht, somebody would have photographed it by now. Anyways, provisionally, we're watching you, Hadjar. Alex Albon. Now, here is an interesting case because Alex is technically bracket 3, but his story is way more complicated than it looks. His father was a racing driver, so yes, there's motorsport DNA in the family. But his mother was famously involved in a luxury car Ponzi scheme involving Ferraris and Bentleys that cost the family significantly. We're not going to dwell on that, but it does paint a picture where privilege isn't the full story. Alex had a difficult upbringing by the standards of most people in this video, which is saying something. And he's had to claw his way back into Formula 1 after being dropped by Red Bull, which, again, not something rich dads can save you from. Debatable bracket 3. The asterisk is real, but so is the talent. George Russell. Extremely talented. Nobody is disputing that. But let's be honest about the pipeline. George came from a financially comfortable background, attended elite motorsport academies, and was snapped up by the Mercedes Junior program. He didn't have to sell a caravan or a family heirloom to get there. Now, I want to be clear, George Russell is fast. He's beaten Lewis Hamilton in equal machinery. He deserves to be in Formula 1. But there's a real difference between deserving it and having the system work in your favor from the start. George Russell had a very nice head start. Good family, good connections, good cheekbones. Well, let's not go there, okay? There's no doubt that he is the full package, but let's not pretend the yellow brick road wasn't already paved. Kimi Antonelli. 19 years old. And yeah, he was still a ridiculous teenager when Mercedes handed him a full-time Formula 1 seat. Raw talent? Disgusting. Blindingly fast. Proper generational stuff. We're not polishing that turd. The kid is the real deal. But let's not pretend this is a fairy tale either. Getting a Mercedes seat as a teenager doesn't happen to random kids whose dad work in IT and mums drive a Škoda. That takes a family extremely plugged into the right paddock conversations. While we were forging sick notes, sneaking warm lager, and bombing with the girls, Kimi was lapping Monza faster than veterans with mortgages and dodgy knees. Connections? Yes. Talented enough to justify it? Also, yes. Annoyingly. The most talented name on this list by a distance. Also, the most connected teenager in motorsport history. Both things, same kid. Now, little Lando Norris. Sweet, funny, Twitch streaming at 2 a.m., absolute menace in a race car. Also, and I say this with affection, fabulously, cartoonishly, almost offensively wealthy. His father, Adam Norris, is worth over 200 million pounds. He made his fortune in the direct-to-consumer pension industry, which sounds very boring, but it clearly paid very well. Lando did not need to sell anything. Lando did not need to call in favors. Lando's dad could have bought a team. He just bought his son a racing career instead, which honestly is more efficient. And look, Lando is fast. Genuinely world championship level fast. But let's not pretend the path from I want to race cars to I have a McLaren seat looked the same for him as it did for Ocon sleeping in a van on the side of the A34. Oscar Piastri, the most quietly lethal driver on the grid. Doesn't say much, just goes out and wins races while everyone else is still talking about their weekend. His dad owns an automotive software company. Sounds fine, right? But when you find out Oscar went to one of Melbourne's most expensive private schools and that his family invested, and I need you to hear this number, over 6.5 million Australian dollars into his racing career before he even got to F1. 6.5 million. That's not a we believe in our son. That's a hedge fund deciding that their portfolio needed a racing driver. That is venture capital for a human being. The results speak for themselves. Piastri is genuinely one of the best on the grid. But can we just acknowledge that the average family cannot put 6.5 million into their child's hobby and call it support? Premium. Also, we want Oscar's dad's financial advisor. Thank you. Charles Leclerc. Monaco baby. The man literally grew up in Monte Carlo. If there's a tax bracket for postcodes alone, Monaco is a category of its own. Now, Charles's personal story is genuinely sad. He lost his father and his mentor, Jules Bianchi, within years of each other, and he carried that grief while climbing to Formula 1. That takes a different kind of strength. But we can hold two truths at once. Charles Leclerc is an exceptional driver, and growing up in Monaco, surrounded by Ferrari connections, connections and racing royalty gave him access that a kid from rural France or rural Kenya simply couldn't have. Still, Charles won on merit. The man can drive a car and make it do things that should not be physically possible around Monaco while carrying grief that would have retired most people emotionally by the age of 22. So here's where it gets complicated. The money got him the door. The connections got him in the room. But nobody, and I mean nobody, buys their way into a lap like Charles put together in qualifying. You cannot purchase racing instinct. You cannot expense account elite pace. Ferrari has tried to sabotage that man in every possible way, and he still extracts something magical. Both things are true. He came from privilege, and he genuinely slaps. Max Verstappen, 4-time world champion, probably the fastest driver alive after the love of my life, Sir Lewis Hamilton, and also the most famous product of motorsport nepotism in the history of the sport. Both parents were racing drivers. You heard that right, both. His father, the famous ticking bomb, Jos Verstappen, competed in Formula 1. His mother, Sophie Kumpen, raced karts at the highest level. Max didn't just grow up around racing. He was born into a racing laboratory. Imagine if your parents were both Olympic sprinters, and then you turned out to be really quite fast. You're talented. Yes, you put in the work. Yes, but also, the gene pool was doing some heavy lifting before you even laced up your first shoe. The difference with Max is he's so outrageously, disgustingly, historically fast that it almost doesn't matter. He's earned every championship. He'd have made it regardless. But let's be clear, no normal child gets to do what Max did. His entire childhood was motorsport. His dad pushed him to the absolute limit. There were documentaries on how intense that was. But it also produced a driver who arrived in F1 at 17, knowing more about racing than most veterans. Max Verstappen is nepotism's greatest advertisement. Look what it can produce, says the system. Yeah, but if the kid hadn't been a generational talent, we reply. The system changes the subject. Carlos Sainz Jr. And just listen, the clue is right there in the bloody name, isn't it? His old man, Carlos Sainz Sr., is a certified motorsport deity, 2-time World Rally champion, absolute savage of the stages, a legend who made grown men in Group A cars look like they were just driving to Tesco. Carlos Jr. grew up in a house where the dinner talk table wasn't about homework, it was about racing lines, car setup, and who his dad could ring up to get him into the right junior program at the perfect time. We're talking generational motorsport nepotism with God-tier networking. Now, before the comment section comes at me like it's Singapore qualifying, yes, Carlos is talented. Proper talented. The man won a Grand Prix for Ferrari. He's gone wheel to wheel and beaten multiple world champions as teammates. Nobody serious is calling him a fraud. The smooth operator clears. But let's not get it twisted. There's a universe out there where little Carlos wakes up one day and says, "Dad, I actually want to be an accountant." And Senior just goes, "Fair enough, son. Here's a calculator." In this timeline though, nah. There was only ever one path. The seat was basically preheated before he even put the helmet on. Talented? 100%. But let's not pretend the surname didn't do 60% of the heavy lifting getting him into that Ferrari cockpit. Only in F1, man. Only in F1. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Every driver we've discussed to this point, whether they had money, connections, famous parents, or all three, had one thing in common. They can point us to results. Max, 4 championships. Sainz, a Grand Prix win. Hamilton, 7 titles. Ocon, a win from nothing. Piastri, scoring podiums like it's his job, which it is, but you get my point. Even the guys who had every advantage still had to perform when the lights went out. Formula 1 doesn't let you mail it in just because your dad is famous. But then there's Lance Stroll, son of billionaire Lawrence Stroll, the fashion mogul who didn't just sponsor or call in favors, but straight up bought an entire Formula 1 team, turning Force India into Aston Martin as the Lance Stroll Employment Agency, where dad is the chairman deciding if his son still has a job, and sure, Lance had some podiums and decent moments, so he's not totally useless. But if we remove the family connection entirely, would he still be in F1 like Hamilton or Verstappen or Ocon clearly would? Because somewhere somewhere out there is a hungry driver who crushed F3 and F2 only to hear teams say, sorry, but we already have our driver sorted, and that driver was Lance, thanks to Daddy buying the team, making him not the villain, but the perfect symptom of what happens when ultimate money meets zero guardrails in a system that created him. The only driver in Formula 1 whose seat literally came with a receipt. And there you have it, F1's nepotism problem, ranked, roasted, and served hot. Here's the uncomfortable truth under all the jokes. Money in the motorsport isn't new. It's always been expensive to go fast. But there's a difference between this sport requires investment and this sport has become a playground for generational wealth. The more we celebrate the Ocons and the Alonsos, the ones who clawed their way up from nothing, the more we have to ask why the system makes it so hard for them to exist and why so easy for others. Because for every Lance Stroll with a guaranteed seat, there's a driver out there who was faster, hungrier, and better, and never got the phone call. And that, my friend, is the real nepotism problem in F1. Anyway, like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments who you think is the biggest nepo baby, other than the obvious answer. We all know the obvious answer. See you in the next one.